James Hinchcliffe is an unemployed race car driver. Racer magazine reported last night that Pato Award and Oliver Askew will be announced as the drivers for Arrow McLaren Schmidt-Peterson's team for 2020 in the IndyCar series. This leaves the popular Canadian without a ride. So there's a lot to discuss here. In this video, I will be talking about the move that McLaren has made, not only to get rid of James Hinchcliffe, but the drivers they have brought in, or look like they are set to announce to bring in. Obviously, this has not been confirmed yet, but if it comes from Racer Magazine and it's talking about anything to be related to Zach Brown, I trust them because, of course, they were the ones that had the exclusive scoop back in 2017, where Fernando Alonso was going to come and run the Indy 500, and since then they have been fed pretty much all of the accurate information pertaining to this program. So pretty much, if they say it about McLaren, it's the Bible, and here we are in a brave new world. So obviously the James Hinchcliffe thing is going to be why a lot of you are clicking, why a lot of you are commenting on this, and why a lot of you are interested in this. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this move to put two young drivers into these seats. Obviously, it's one that I think a lot of people are going to initially second guess because of the fact that we have seen, obviously, by my hat, we remember what happened this year with McLaren's effort with some inexperience, at least in Indy cars, kind of causing their ultimate demise where they didn't even make the Indy 500, which was the one race they attempted this year. Now you've got relative inexperience in the driver's seat, though I would suggest that having Pato Award, who was awarded a Red Bull contract, and we're going to need to talk about that because he's now out of the Red Bull contract, but also Oliver Askew, who has just gradually moved up the Indy Lights, or the Mazda Road to Indy, or the Road to Indy now as it's known. It was known as the Mazda Road to Indy when he entered it. Has just been consistently winning races. He's gotten to the very top step. He won the Freedom 100 at Indianapolis, and now he's won the Road to Indy scholarship by winning the Indy Lights Championship. So obviously, Askew is a capable driver and was on the list of a lot of other teams, including Ganassi Racing, to try to hire. So that driver combination, I think Pato Award for sure, that's a superstar move right there. That is a driver, obviously, as I think Robin Miller reported way back at Long Beach, has been on Zach Brown's radar. Then you had the Red Bull thing happen where he got signed to Red Bull. He left IndyCar to go Super Formula racing. And then recently he left Super Formula and said, hey, I'm on the market again. And now we have this. And it was, I think, it didn't take a whole lot of speculation to speculate that he was probably going to go to McLaren. And really even Oliver Askew has had quite a few ties to McLaren as well, or at least Schmidt-Peterson. In fact, they wanted him to run a car, the 5 car, and we'll get to that, at Laguna Seca, and Askew kind of wisely, from a PR perspective, declined that. And obviously, now we're going to get to see what both of these drivers can do over a full season. They're both being paid, I'm sure, and from absolutely that perspective, it's cool to see two young drivers getting a shot at a big team. Now, experience-wise, that I mentioned that a little bit earlier. What's going to happen there? Now, even though it's not totally announced, you would assume that there's going to be a car for Fernando Alonso at the Indy 500. He has experience. Obviously, Award tried to qualify last year, did not make it. And really, if you think about the Schmidt-Peterson team, which essentially this is going to be going forward just with McLaren and Arrow branding, they haven't exactly been able to qualify at the Indy 500 recently. So there is still going to be that question with this team. Now, they obviously have the Chevy engine now with the McLaren partnership. Obviously, the Honda bridge has kind of been burned for the foreseeable future between McLaren and Honda, so that was their only choice. But that being said, the Chevy is theoretically the best engine at Indianapolis, but then again, it didn't really help McLaren last year when they tried to qualify for the Indy 500. Championship-wise, obviously, we've seen what Pato O'Ward can do in an IndyCar. We know he's very exciting, very aggressive, and very fast. And with a solid team behind him, I think he is going to look very good, unless he has a supreme sophomore slump, which I don't think he's going to have. Askew, highly touted rookie. Highly touted. If you watched him in Indy Lights, you probably saw a pretty boring race because more often than not, Askew was so far out in front of the competition that it wasn't even funny. Him being given an opportunity, and a big opportunity right off the bat, I think is exciting and indicative of what the road to Indy can do for young drivers that are able to make it all the way to the top step of that ladder system, win the championship, and then end up in the top series. There's not many other series out there with ladder systems that can claim that happens. So we've addressed the positives of this situation. Now let's address the big honking negative that's sitting there, which is James Hinchcliffe and the fact that he has been, I think many people would probably say this is accurate, unceremoniously fired from McLaren. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that if you've been really paying close attention to this situation, this isn't exactly a surprise that it didn't work out that James Hinchcliffe would be driving for Schmidt-Peterson in 2020. There have been just too many red flags, too many situations, too many roadblocks, some small, some large, that have all kind of snowballed into the situation that we've had. So I've kind of compiled the timeline of events that I believe, in my opinion, led to where we are now, where James Hinchcliffe is no longer at Arrow McLaren Schmidt-Peterson or whatever, Arrow ASPM or whatever they call it. I know Marshall Pruitt calls it Spam, the Spam team, so I guess maybe we'll call it the Spam team too. Okay, so obviously when McLaren signed up, they couldn't go with Honda engines. The Chevrolet thing was announced, and James Hinchcliffe put out a statement on his social media that he had worked with General Motors before and was excited to work with them again. And even people like Zach Brown were coming out and saying, we have a contract with Hinch. He's got one more year on the current contract. We're sticking with him. But we obviously knew that James Hinchcliffe had very deep personal connections to Honda and Honda Canada. In the United States, he was literally the face of the Honda spring sales event. Throughout the spring and summer in the United States, whether you were listening to the radio, watching on TV, you probably didn't avoid James Hinchcliffe's face. So someone who's that deeply associated with Honda, it was going to be really hard from the very beginning to see him in a Chevy. I'm sure from both manufacturers' camps as well. I don't know if a Chevy representative would really want to see someone who's so deeply associated as being seen in a black suit with a big H on it as driving for one of the most high-profile Chevy teams, especially considering the international press that McLaren and Chevy are going to get coming this May when presumably Alonso comes back in, or even if Alonso doesn't come in, it's still McLaren, and everybody knows the story of what has happened the last 2 years they've tried to attempt the Indy 500. So there's going to be a lot of press. And James Hinchcliffe being a Honda company man, that was, I think, going to be a problem. But I don't think it was irreconcilable either, at least at this point. Then we had the ESPN body issue. And I covered that when that came out, and I even said, you're not seeing Hinch's ding-a-ling. It's tasteful. It tells a compelling story. Is it a bit risque? Sure. But, in my opinion, it wasn't a super big issue. It was a super big issue to Arrow Electronics, which is, of course, the sponsor of this new collaboration between Schmidt and McLaren, and sponsored both teams independently this year, and obviously is the title sponsor of this merged effort. It's still unclear exactly what the problem was, but Jenna Fryer reported that this issue was one that Arrow was not comfortable with. whether that's some sort of a morality issue or whether it's just something as simple as they weren't informed about it. They had their logo in this body issue and they didn't want it to be there. So some heads rolled at Schmidt-Peterson. I think some of their PR people were let go. Some of the marketing directors were let go from that team because of that. This also applied to James Hinchcliffe. Apparently, they wanted him out of the seat, and it was reported by Racer magazine that Oliver Askew was actually looked like he was set to, or they wanted to place Oliver Askew in James Hinchcliffe's seat for Laguna Seca. And if that didn't tell you what the writing on the wall was at that point, unless you didn't see that article, I don't know what else could tell you, because that's the team clearly favoring one driver who has not even driven their cars over one who has been there, for 5 years at that point, won races for them. That was the point where at least in my brain, it was like there are I can't say that word, irreconcilable differences between this team and this driver at this point. And I think the final nail in the coffin was the fact that Pato O'Ward ended up on the market. And clearly, a person does not leave a Red Bull contract unless there is a major Grand Slam offer on the table. Clearly, that was with Zach Brown and McLaren. There wasn't as much of a path to a major seat at Red Bull. Obviously, I talked about when that was announced that there wasn't he couldn't get the super license points in Super Formula to be able to move up to F2 or even F1 at Toro Rosso. So Helmut Marko didn't really have anything for Pato O'Ward. Pato O'Ward really didn't have anything for Helmut Marko. They parted ways amicably, and obviously now Pato O'Ward is at McLaren. So you had an unhappy sponsor, a team that wanted to go with a different driver, and now you had Zach Brown's personal choice. So you had all these factors coming into it, and it leads to James Hinchcliffe being released from his contract 1 year early. So where does he go? Where does he go from here? I have some things. I have some personal speculation, but there's also been some stuff that has been reported on in the media. NBC Sports has said that Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan are looking at hiring James Hinchcliffe, as well as Dale Coyne Racing. Now, obviously, because, like I mentioned earlier, Hinch is a Honda man, it seems like it's more likely that Hinch is going to go to a Honda team before a Chevy team. I think that's fairly obvious. The Rahal thing has been talked about since they said, oh, hey, we're going to do a third car. Of course, they said, hey, we're going to do a third car last year, and the funding didn't materialize. It only showed up in Indianapolis for Jordan King. Again, it's probably going to take funding. Marsha Pruitt has reported that James Hinchcliffe has no funding, or very little funding. So I don't know if a Rahal ride is realistic at this point. Dale Coyne. Dale Coyne is capable of doing 3 cars. Is that realistic? Maybe. Again, I really think if it's a Honda team and it's full-time, it's going to be Honda themselves stepping up to help fund the ride. I don't know if there's a full season IndyCar sponsorship sitting out there waiting for James Hinchcliffe right now. So what next? If not Rahal, if not Coyne, then what? I honestly think the most likely thing at this point, given the information that we have, Hinch is not going to run a full season. And I think if that is the case, his best option is to go to Michael Andretti and take the Connor Daly seat that was there last year. I know, sorry, Connor Daly fans. And try to run for Andretti at the Indianapolis 500. Try to have a good run there and try to win the race. That may be the best option right now that could be sitting on the table. Obviously, he ran Bathurst for Andretti, and ironically, Zach Brown. I don't know what happened there, but maybe that's the best option. A couple of other options that are just sitting out there because the seats are available. AJ Foyt Racing. We know AJ Foyt Racing is probably not going to stick with Matthias Laced. They need money. Does James have any money? That seems to not be the case. It would be a good fit because it would help Tony Kanaan to have an experienced teammate. It would help James Hinchcliffe because he would have a Chevy engine. Foyt hasn't really struggled at qualifying at the Indy 500. Even look at Pippa Mann last year in a satellite car for Foyt. So there's that possibility. Then Carlin Racing. Again, if you're going to run for Carlin Racing, you're going to need cash. Does James Hinchcliffe have cash? No. Again, it's a Chevy thing, so Honda can't help Hinch get a ride there. I think that would be very unlikely. This is a weird situation. A very popular driver. Many people have been talking about how, this is the one Canadian link left in the series. It's one of the most popular drivers, one of the drivers that has mainstream appeal. He's not in the series. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm fascinated to read what you think, where you think Hinch is going to go, and what you think of McLaren's choice of drivers going forward. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and we're going to be talking about this as well in This Week in Racing when it's officially announced. We'll see you in the next video.